Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Geezerology Freeform Friday. 95-year-old Mel Brooks has just published a book. It was published by Ballantine Books on November the 30th, titled All About Me, My Remarkable Life in Show Business. And Bob told me a few days ago that he's read this book and he would like to do a review on it. So Bob, take it away, buddy.
All righty. Thank you, Scotty. As Scotty said, this is the book. It's autobiography by Mel Brooks. You know, if you're of a certain age, you know Mel Brooks. And back in the 70s, especially, Mel Brooks comedy movies were everywhere. Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, High Anxiety, Silent Movie. Just the premier funny man of that era. So I was kind of excited to read his book when it came out. And so far, it's been a fascinating read. I'm about three-fourths of the way through it, but I've read enough of it that I feel I can speak about it intelligently. And it's not so much an autobiography. Mel Brooks doesn't really write that much about himself and his family and stuff. Instead, he wanted to tell people about his adventures in show business. And wow, what a time. This guy was there from the beginning all the way up until now. And, he was there at the beginning of what we called the golden age of television, and then he did the movies and stuff. So he's just had an incredible stamp on show business. And I learned some things that I did not know, and hopefully I can take you on that journey. Anyway, Mel Brooks was born Melvin Kaminsky in New York City. His father died at a young age. He does recount, growing up in New York. An uncle took him to see a Broadway production starring Ethel Merman, and he was so infatuated with it that became his impetus to have a career in show business. World War II intervened. Mel served in the U.S. Army as a combat engineer. When he was staying overseas for occupation duty, because of him being a jokester and some of the things that he had done preliminary as far as show business, he got moved over to special services in the entertainment branch. So he did some of that overseas, returned to the U.S. in 1946, and started a job working for a Broadway producer, which gave him a background to do his actual first movie to producers. Well, anyway, at some point he hooked up with Sid Caesar and became a staff writer on Sid Caesar's Show of Shows, and had a 10-year association with Sid Caesar. And so he recounts Sid Caesar being his mentor and learning everything. And, for those of us who were young, you may not know who Sid Caesar was, but he was one of the greatest comedians of that golden age of television. And they did an hour-and-a-half comedy variety musical show called Your Show of Shows. And it was a huge, huge hit on television back in the 50s. And I started thinking immediately about Saturday Night Live when I was reading about Your Show of Shows here. And I remember when Saturday Night Live debuted in 1975, it was such an incredible phenomenon that we all stayed home on Saturday nights to watch Saturday Night Live rather than going out. And Saturday Night Live got so much attention for supposedly all its groundbreaking. They were plowing ground that Sid Caesar had been there on originally, because back in the 50s, Your Show of Show was so popular that people stayed home on Saturday nights, and revenue at restaurants and theaters and everything dropped. And in fact, the network received complaints from people saying, "Would you move this to another night? You're killing our business," which is the same thing that happened with Saturday Night Live. And as Mel Brooks points out, they did 39 episodes of an hour-and-a-half live TV show every year. That's remarkable, folks, if you think the work that it took to do that. And so anyway, so Mel Brooks recounts in detail all of those early years. He recounts his friendship with Carl Reiner, where they developed that classic skit about the 2,000-year-old man. So he deals with all of those. Then, like I say, he spent about 10 years with Sid Caesar. On one of their summer breaks from doing the show, he got invited to go out to Hollywood to do some script writing out there. realized that movies were probably the future, and that people remembered a movie you made, but whatever you did on television was forgotten. So when he came back to New York, he actually tried to convince Sid Caesar to leave TV and go out to Hollywood to do movies. Sid Caesar said, "Yeah, I'll think about it." Well, Sid's agent heard this and went to the network and said, "You know that Sid Caesar's thinking about leaving TV to go to movies." And it panicked the network so much that they got to Sid Caesar and said, "We'll bump your salary from $5,000 a week to $25,000 a week if you'll stay." That's how popular that show was. And after reading that, I actually went on YouTube and I looked up some of the skits from the old Show of Shows. They were hilarious. Yes, it's grainy black and white, but they were fantastic. So, Mel learned his craft, from a great master. Then in the 60s, after about 10 years with Sid Caesar, Mel finds himself finally unemployed, once the show finally went off the air. So casting about looking for things to do, he creates the 2,000-Year-Old Man skit. He teamed up with Buck Henry and created the spy spoof show Get Smart. And then he finally segues into making movies, and we came up with some of these classic movies that I mentioned early, Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, and all those. And he provides, the story about making each one of these movies with some great anecdotes. And I love learning about the background of stuff. So some of the things that he talked about, making these movies were fantastic. For example, Blazing Saddles. He originally wanted Richard Pryor to play the lead character of Black Bart, the sheriff. And Warner Brothers, which was the studio making the movie, absolutely refused. They felt that Pryor was too erratic and couldn't be relied on. So they settled. They instead found Cleavon Little, who did a fantastic job with it. The original casting for the alcoholic gunslinger Buddy was Gig Young. And Gig Young actually had a serious drinking problem. Mel Brooks says he was assured that Young was on the wagon and everything was good. So they're doing rehearsals on a Friday. They're scheduled to start shooting Monday. And there's a scene in the movie, for those of you who've seen it, where the alcoholic gunslinger is hanging upside down in the bunk in the cell. Well, when they did that with Gig Young, he starts vomiting furiously, so badly they had to take him to the hospital, where he got diagnosed with delirium tremens, the DTs. So obviously his drinking wasn't under control. So Gene Wilder had been in Mel Brooks' first movie, The Producers. So Mel called him, and Gene said, "I'm on the next plane." So he flies out there over the weekend and steps into that role on a Monday. And of course, the rest, as they say, is history.
That made Gene Wilder's career.
Made Gene Wilder's career, absolutely, yes. Silent movie. When Mel Brooks was making silent movie, it was truly a silent movie. There was one spoken word in it, and the word was spoken by Marcel Marceau, the mime. But anyway, it's a movie within a movie. And and Mel Brooks got all of these famous actors at that time to agree to appear in the movie, which was a movie about them trying to get famous actors to make a movie to save a studio. And so one of them that he got was Burt Reynolds. And he recounts about being at Burt Reynolds' house. And Burt Reynolds had the initials BR emblazoned on everything that he owned in the house. Shirts, ashtrays, even doorknobs had BR on them. So, and then at one point in 1976, the Exhibitors of America placed Brooks fifth on the list of stars who exerted the greatest box office appeal. Burt Reynolds was number 6. So Brooks would recount how he would call Burt on the phone and go, "Hi, 6, this is 5 speaking." And then Young Frankenstein, which was his parody of the old monster movies. He actually did it as an homage to those movies, not making fun of them, and actually used props from the original 1930s movie Frankenstein that were still in storage. High Anxiety was Mel Brooks's tribute to Alfred Hitchcock, his homage. And before he made High Anxiety, he actually went to Hitchcock and met with him for his approval of doing this. Hitchcock thought it was a great idea and actually met every Friday with Mel Brooks to help him on the script as it was developed. So they make the movie, and Hitchcock shows up for the premiere screening, and he's sitting next to Brooks. And all Brooks hears from Hitchcock is one little chuckle partway through the movie, and that's it. And then Hitchcock at the end of the film just gets up and walks out. So Brooks is sitting there thinking, oh my God, I've just made Hitchcock mad. Well, a short time later, he gets a package delivered to his office, opens it, and it's a case of very expensive, rare champagne, along with a note going, fantastic movie, loved it. So Mel Brooks put together his own movie studio to make films. And one of the very first films that he made was The Elephant Man. And he said that he made it, that he intentionally downplayed his involvement because he wanted people to take the movie seriously and not think that it's another Mel Brooks comedy. And also, for those of you maybe not familiar with the movie, it's about a man from Victorian England named Edward Merrick, who was hideously deformed and was making his living basically as a circus freak. And Merrick is befriended by a doctor who actually brings him into real society and gives him a chance at a normal life. Brooks didn't want audiences to see the actor in the makeup and think it was something to laugh at. So he intentionally downplayed his involvement in it. And he wrote in his book that even to this day, people are astounded to learn that he was the producer and creator of that film with his studio. And also he went on to do several other films that were incredibly serious, including the horror movie The Fly with Jeff Goldblum.
Those two that you mentioned, I don't know what else they've done, but those two that you mentioned were very, very, very good movies.
Yes, they were.
They weren't just knockoff movies.
No, and he gave a chance, and according to his book, in both instances, he used directors that had never really made movies before or had very like David Cronenberg and. So yeah, those were exceptionally good films and very serious.
Yeah,
films.
David. The Elephant Man was one of David Lynch's first movies. Yes. One of the first movies he directed. Yeah.
And then, of course, right now I'm at the part where he's writing about making the movie Spaceballs, which was his homage to science fiction and obviously Star Wars movies. And he talks in here about. And he said that Spaceballs went on to become one of the biggest hits that he had. And he said, I think I've autographed more Spaceballs posters than for any other Mel Brooks film. And I've even gotten some letters from young fans that saw Spaceballs before they saw Star Wars. Mel Brooks is a comedy genius, and if you were around in the 70s, you couldn't escape his movies. They were some of the highest grossing ones around. And I gained some interesting insight into Mel Brooks and the way his mind works. And he said that when he did his comedy, he didn't just want to do laughs. He always wanted to try to have an underlying meaning to what he was doing. Blazing Saddles, for example, its underlying topic was racism. So even though it was a slapstick spoof of Westerns, he wanted to have a message under it. And he said he's always tried to do that, with the films that he's made and stuff. And he didn't address the question that's a debate topic of today, and that is, could Blazing Saddles be made today? When you consider the cancel culture, that we live in, and in fact, that Blazing Saddles pretty much took a shot at everybody, blacks, gays, Native Americans, you name it. It was taking its shots at them.
They used a lot of words that we absolutely cannot say today.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, when you debate about could Blazing Saddles be made today, the smart aleck answer is, well, no, of course not. All the actors are dead. So he doesn't address that in the book, which I've kind of would have been interested to see what his take is on that. But I know at the time at the time I didn't really think about those themes when I saw Blazing Saddles. It was just a hilariously funny movie. And over the years, I have learned to appreciate what he was saying with that film. And I do really wonder, could you do something like that today? Or would we be so hypersensitive to everything that there would just be people coming unhinged right and left over it?
Well,
But
I don't believe Blazing Saddles could be made today.
yeah, I
No
don't think
way,
it could
no
either.
way, no way. Every time I see a little clip of it on YouTube or or some retrospective on TV or something, every time I see a clip of it, it's like it, with given our sensibilities now and the 21st century, there's really some really cringe worthy moments there that at the time were just stuff played for laughs.
But Brooks was never afraid to make fun of himself and to make fun of his own background. And he had small to big roles in most of his movies. He was not only an actor but the director, and he wasn't afraid to parody himself as his Jewish background and his cultural background. So he was willing to make fun of himself. And so, but anyway, it's a fascinating book if you're interested in the history of popular entertainment in this country. Because, like I say, Mel Brooks was there at the dawn of the TV age, and at 95 years old, he's still going strong. He's still out there. He's writing the book. He's still taking meetings with people and stuff. So he's had a long, incredible career. And so far, I found the book really fascinating for the information and the anecdotes, that he puts out.
I
So
I
that's my
don't
take
believe
on it.
I don't believe that book can be anything but fascinating.
It is.
That's a
It
fact.
is.
And then when you're talking about the movies that he financed, which I did a quick look up on Wikipedia, and sure enough, but I mean that gives me a whole other perspective on Mel Brooks, is that he wasn't just some crazy guy just coming up with outrageously funny scripts. He actually knew what the hell he was doing. He knew what a movie was. He's a Grand Slam winner in entertainment. He's won a Grammy for a 2,000-Year-Old Man LP that he did with Carl Reiner.
Mm-hmm.
He's won an Emmy for TV. He's won Oscar for movies, and he's won Tony for Broadway with The Producers, which was a big hit on Broadway. They had several revivals. Well, Bob, thanks for that. That was really interesting. That was a good review. That was an interesting review. It was captivating, and I appreciate you coming on and telling us about that. He was a big part of our growing up. As during my high school years and just out of high school, he was one of the superstars of our culture at that time. I remember back in the in the mid to late 70s, going on into the 80s. If you have some memories about it, drop them down in the comments. We'd like to hear from you. Give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and we will be back with some other good things over the next few Fridays, with some book reviews, some album reviews, some TV reviews. Dan, Bob, and I will be doing panel discussions over the next few Wednesdays of some classic albums that we all remember, and we're going to blow the dust off of the albums and put them on a turntable and listen to them and talk about them. So thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you soon. So long.
All right, thank you.